Welcome to Catskill Weiss Schwarz. On today's video, we will be doing a set overview for Dandadan. This is a booster pack and trial deck that just came out at the very end of January 2026. Came out in JP 2025. This is a very interesting set. It's sort of an interesting set to start the year, or at least it was supposed to be the set that started the year for English until Girls Band Cry got a last minute release date. But this was originally the first set for 2026 to be released, scheduled to be released in Weiss, and is an interesting set because I think the general consensus in the Weiss community is that when it came out in JP last year, it was one of the worst sets that was released for the entire year, which was very surprising because Dandadan, when it came out, has been an incredibly popular show. So I know that when it was announced, there was a lot of hype around it. People were very excited that it was getting a set and that it was getting a set so quickly after its first season premiered. I remember when season one came out, it kind of just took the anime world by storm for a period of time. Everyone was talking about it. People kept telling me to watch it and all that. I never actually got around to watching it until similar. If anyone's watched my video, a set of review on Girls Band Cry, I didn't actually start watching Dandadan until the week before the English set came out. I have enjoyed the show immensely. So whereas before watching the show, I really did not care for this set. I wasn't looking forward to it at all. Once I did start watching it, I was looking forward to it. However, I was disappointed because I had already thought that the set was going to be bad since everyone has just been sort of just saying how bad the set is for quite some time. I had watched some of the set, I hadn't watched all of it. I'm sorry, I had read a lot of the set, but I hadn't read all of it. I mostly focused on the level 3 combos and was a little disappointed by them. But once it was just a few days to release, I just read through every card in the set, and I was surprised by how many good cards I found in the set. I don't think the set is a tier 0 set by any means or anything like that, but I think it has more going for it than people initially thought. I think it is a fun set that is very flavorful to the show. I think it's got some cool cards at every level. I think it does have some weaknesses, namely its level 3 combos are just sort of fine at best, and I think that's where it gets a lot of heat from. But I think it has a decent pool of zeros. It's got some good level 1 combos, and it's got some fun things going for it. I think it's a set that if you are a fan of the show, you will not feel bad about picking up and just playing around with the cards and building different decks and trying different things out. It's definitely a great way for a newer player to get into Weiss. It's not particularly complicated. It's definitely a set that's not going to be the most meta. However, second set has already been confirmed for JP, which is coming out in a few months, I believe. So I think with the second set coming, I'm assuming we'll get it at some point in English, even though we don't know what cards are coming out as of the time of recording this video. We don't know what cards are coming out in the set 2. I think there is actually a very solid framework from the cards that are in set 1. There are some really good things in it, some really interesting things. Definitely a lot more interesting things than I had initially thought there was, based on when I briefly just read some of the cards many months ago. Definitely not something that's overpowered in really any way. It feels like a very fair set. But we're going to talk about some cool level zeros because I think level zeros are very important to a deck overall. If you don't have good zeros, you start losing the game as soon as it starts and you just start playing from behind. I'm thankful to report that there are a decent number of good zeros in Dandadan. Also going to showcase some of the level 1 combos in the set, not all of them. But the ones that I think that are worth looking at. Same with the level 3 combos. We're going to look at most, but not all of them. And explain them and give some brief overviews for each one and talk about strengths and weaknesses for those combos and which ones might be worth playing. And just going to talk about some notable cards that are just good to throw in a lot of different sort of decks. And I am also going to discuss the collectability of this set. Seeing the demand for the set on release weekend, which was this past weekend, I was surprised by how many people really seemed to be opening the set. I knew that the show was popular, for sure. So, but I also knew that the set was generally determined to not be good. So I thought that a lot of interest had sort of waned. Now it's a little tough to know how many people are just very casual collectors that were just opening up a case, and how many of them were more players that wanted to play with the cards. It's sort of tough to say. But there does seem to be a really good amount of supply. So I'm sure at some point we will get set 2 in English, whenever that may be. But it is always nice to see a set that isn't flopping, even if people still don't say the nicest things about the set. It definitely seems so far to have been opened up a really good amount, and I think that is always nice to see. Starting off, I'm going to get the worst bit about the set, in my opinion, out of the way early. Just get the negative stuff out of the way so that we could focus on some of the more positive aspects of the set. That would be the collectability of this set. This set is definitely a disappointment when it comes to collecting it. For anyone who just likes trading cards of anime that they enjoy, if they don't care about signatures or whatnot, then this set is actually not terrible, because every card, or just about every card, comes as a foil in some way. There are a lot of SRs in the set. It's a set that's got like 90 or so, give or take, SRs in it. So far, most of which seem to be relatively cheap. You got like 30 something triple rares between the trial deck and the main booster. The weakness for this set is that there are 26, 27 SPs in the set. However, pretty much none of them have signatures, which is normally the big draw for collectors when it comes to Weiss. There are 2 signatures in the set that are SSPs. These were originally promos released at some point after release in Japan, but we got them in the actual booster. But there's only 2 with signatures in the entire set. They are really good cards, so they did pick those wisely, but unfortunately, those are basically it. There are secret rares, which I'm going to show here and talk about in a bit, but definitely collectability wise, this set is sort of not it. For anyone that's looking for anything substantial, it's definitely not really great for anyone that's opening up a case and is counting on making their money back. The value just sort of isn't there. I think the biggest chase cards are probably just going to be these 2 Ira SSPs, which do look very nice, and they are very good cards, particularly the level 1 combo here. But Ira is the only character that has any sort of actual signature in the set, and it is just these 2. You do not get an SSP in every case, from what I've read for this. For the last couple of 2-3 years or so, Bushiroad generally will give you 1 SSP in a case. It does not seem to be the case, no pun intended, for this set. I've also read some people say that they've opened up master cases and it's not guaranteed in a master, which would be a real shame also. Fortunately, these 2 cards do also have SR versions with the same exact art. They just don't have the signature. They also have SPs without signatures as well that also have the same exact art. For anyone that's an Ira fan, which is probably a lot of people, I have enjoyed her so far in the show. They probably won't be disappointed that she is the one character chosen to get signatures. And for anyone that likes Ira and likes to play competitively or that sort of thing, they probably won't be disappointed that it was these 2 cards that were chosen of hers to get those signatures, because they are good cards objectively, especially the level 1 combo, which we're going to get into later. But short of that, the set has 26 or so SPs in it, and that's sort of a problem because they kind of just look like this. Here's another Ira. This is an SP. Next to it, I have put the SR version. Now, obviously, with a slideshow, you can't really tell the foiling with these 2 pictures, but the one on the left is the SR, the one on the right is the SP. If you think they're the same at first glance, I wouldn't blame you, because they look almost identical. The art's the same. There is the gray box on the SR around the text, which the SP does not have. Now, I haven't seen the SPs in person yet. I did buy one for $15, right, I think the day before release day, because it was an early play healer that was only $15. I just haven't gotten it in person yet. Generally, the SP foiling will be a little bit nicer than the SR foiling, but just seeing the prices people are asking for SPs, and the fact that they're not really selling at those prices either. The only one I've really seen move consistently is the Momo level 3, which isn't pictured here, but we'll see later, for our level 3 combo. And even that is moving $50, $75. I think that's mostly because people like Momo, and the art is actually different from the SR art for that particular card. Most of the SPs in the set, the 26 or so of them, they share their SR art. So the art isn't any different for the majority of them. Only a few of them actually have different art. And I'll admit, for those few, the art is better, in my opinion, than their SR counterparts. But in terms of SPs, pulling one of the SPs just feels really bad. So many of them are just being listed for like $20. I got an early play healer for $15 on release, which is like nuts. There, I think you get 4 SPs in a case, but which is more than average, I guess, for a Weiss release. But that's pretty fair considering that they just don't have much value, which is a real shame. There is a rarity of card, a Dan rare in this, but those don't seem to have much value either. And I think the art is the same from their non-foil counterparts. Um, it is a shame for anyone that opened up a case and they find that they basically most likely just lost money on their case. Hopefully people were able to get close to breaking even, um, which is pretty hard to do unless you pull the SSP, which is definitely not guaranteed, or by pulling one of these secret pluses, which I will admit do look very nice. They still would have benefited from a signature on them. But these secret pluses generally, they're not guaranteed. Like a secret, they're not in every. There's not one per master. It's one per several. I don't know the exact ratios or if it varies from set to set. They do look nice, but all three of these are the three secret pluses in the set, and they will have some value to them. And they are good cards. Bushiroad did do a good job when they chose the 3 secrets, and they decided that these 3 characters were going to get secret pluses. They chose good cards to put them on, level 3 combos for each of them. So that is something. And I've been told that the foiling is very nice on them, but they don't have signatures on them either. Each one of these Secret Pluses has the same art as their SP counterparts, because not only do these cards come in Secret Pluses, they also come in regular SPs, they also come in SRs. The SPs share the same artwork. The only thing that they're missing is for Ira, it doesn't have those, whatever the writing says around her, doesn't have that. The SP's lacking that. The Momo is missing all that writing around her, and the Okaroon is missing the writing plus all the hands that are coming at him. But the art is the same on the SP versions, and they cost a fraction of the price, which makes pulling the Super Pluses feel not as good. And they probably already didn't feel that great. They're still very rare. If you just open up a random box and pull one, you're not going to be disappointed because it is so rare. But the fact that you kind of sort of need to pull one of these to get closer to breaking even on opening up a case, especially with the inflated price of cases recently, it is sort of a shame. If you're a fan of Dandadan, you might not care. You might just want that experience of opening the set and just pulling some Dandadan cards and getting on a lot of foils, even though based on early TCG player prices, their foils aren't really moving, and they are not moving for particularly high amounts, which is a shame. But that's also good for people who just want some cheap foils from Dandadan, which I'm sure is a lot of people. Weiss is a game that's a ton of fun to play, but it is largely a collector's game. So a lot of people will just pick up cards from sets from shows that they like, from IPs that they like. Dandadan does have a tremendous amount of popularity, so just some cheap foils might be nice for those people. Just makes opening it up not feel the greatest. But that would be it for the worst part about this set, which is by far the collectability. I do like that they have been giving lately a lot of sets have been getting where everything pretty much will have a foil version. That's not necessarily an SP or above. I do like that. So having, even though there are like 90 SRs or whatever, um, seems like there's a good amount of supply and the prices aren't too crazy for them. Um, that is enjoyable. It just stinks that for whatever reason they couldn't license more than Iris signature on 2 cards. I'm obviously a whole lot goes into licensing things, but typically these deals are often made long before the show premieres. So I don't know if the rights holders were just really holding out. If they thought they had a major hit on their hands. I'm not exactly sure how popular the manga was before the anime actually premiered, and if they just didn't want to license the signatures, or if they were holding out for more money, or if there was an issue with too many of the voice actors, or whatever it is. I really have no idea. I know that the Ira voice actress in Japanese is a very prolific voice actress who does a lot of stuff. I'm not quite sure about the voice actors for Momo and Okaroon, so I'm not sure if there was an issue with being able to license their signatures or what was going on. But it is definitely disappointing, and it definitely harms the collectability of it. Now, normally, if a set isn't the most competitive set when it comes to playing it, and it also has an issue with collectability, very often we've seen that it just sort of doesn't get opened a ton. But fortunately, that doesn't seem to be the case with Dandadan because it is so popular. It seems that enough people were able to just look past that and were willing to just open it up because Weiss, right now it's at time of recording, it's the beginning of February. This set came out, I think, January 30th of 2026. But it has been kind of slow in the English portion for Weiss. We had Girls Band Cry the week before Dandadan. That also doesn't seem like it was opened up a ton. We didn't have a release in December. In November, we had Konosuba, which wasn't opened up a ton. We did have the Frieren reprint, but reprints tend to be slow to open. Stores don't always get their product of the reprint at the same time. And then once it does come in, there isn't that same initial hype as there is, even though Frieren is incredibly popular and it definitely needed a reprint, and I am glad it got it. Oh, I forgot. Persona also got a reprint. Persona 3 Reload for some reason, which is because that's a set no one needed a reprint for because there was so much supply, but whatever. So the point is that Weiss has been sort of slow. We haven't really had a major set release that has sold well since Azure Lane Volume 2 in October, so it has been a little dry. So while Dandadan definitely could have been better, and I think it would have done even better than it has done, if they fix certain things like how good the cards were and the collectability of it by just adding more signatures and not having such worthless SPs because most of them are worthless. It has sold well, I think. There does seem to be some interest in it. I think that just goes to show, has less to do with how good the cards are and just has more to do with how popular Dandadan is, that it was able to overcome all of these obstacles that it had going against it. So that is something. It is nice to see a set do well. I am glad that there is plenty of supply out there. Now that I decided to pick cards up, I was able to get everything that I wanted, which is nice. It should make playsets cheaper as time goes on since there is more supply, which would only help getting people into the game. I think Dandadan has enough broad appeal where it should help encourage a few new people to jump into the game, whether that's collecting or playing. So it's always nice when a set has broad appeal. Bushiroad does definitely license some big shows, but when you compare it to something like Union Arena, which is just licensing all these major popular shonen like Bleach and Jujutsu Kaisen, very often even the big releases in that Bushiroad is able to get and license into sets don't necessarily compare to the popularity of something like Bleach. We do get certain things that are, really popular animes like Attack on Titan and the Fate series and stuff like that. But those don't come around as often. So it was nice that they were still able to license something that turned out to be as big as Dandadan. And that seems to have done a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of encouraging people to open up the product, which is nice. So that is something. But Enough of that spiel. Collectability, not great. Definitely the most disappointing part about this set, in my opinion. Art's fine. A lot of it is screenshots from the show, which is normal for Bushy Road. We do get some cool images like the cards on these secret pluses, but that's about it. Not really much more to say. So, moving on, I want to discuss the actual playability of the cards in the set. I'm going to start with the level zeros. As I mentioned in the intro for this video, I think that it's very, very important when you talk about the playability of a set that the set has some really solid zeros. Otherwise, you do start falling behind as soon as the game starts, especially in this modern day when we are starting to see sets more frequently release some really, really good zeros that just keep pushing the boundaries of card design and power creep and all that sort of thing. So I was happy to see that um, based on what I initially heard about the set, I assumed that it would just be an absolute disaster in terms of playability from every level, and I didn't think the zeros would be any different. However, after reading all the zeros, I think while it doesn't have the biggest card pool, um, of really, really great cards. I think it does have a lot of really good cards going for it. There isn't a ton that is particularly broken at zero, but there is an ample supply of different profiles depending on what type of player you are, what type of color you want to be in. The colors in this set are red, green, yellow, blue, so it does have them all. However, blue is by and far the worst. I actually don't think I cover a single blue card in this entire video. There is a reason for that. Blue is pretty terrible, to be honest, in this set. But luckily, the level 0 game outside of blue is actually pretty decent. Tons of different profiles depending on what you're looking for. Lots of good staples that any set should have, but a lot of sets don't always get certain types of profiles, or at least not at 0, which is always confusing. Luckily, this has pretty much anything for any sort of player that they might need. Starting off, we're going to look at this critical hit Momo, who is a very interesting card. During your turn, she gets 1,000 power, so on your turn, she's 3k, which means she sits 2k on your opponent's turn, which isn't terrible. She also has an on-play effect where when you play her out from your hand to your stage, you can put a card from your hand into your clock. If you do, you search your deck for up to one level 1 or lower character, show it to your opponent, add it to hand, shuffle your deck. We have seen that sort of profile a ton, well, not a ton of times, but a decent number of times. Usually you get to search any character from your deck when you have that sort of effect. I think because she swings really big on your turn, they made it so that you can only search level 1 or lower. But that's still perfectly fine. She's a good card. She's great if you're going first, because she can just grab your level 1 combo. You don't need any stock to do it, so if you do go first and play her, you can use her effect right away. You don't miss as if it was just a Ricky. Definitely a solid card overall. The set has enough level 1s and lowers going in red, yellow, and green that really isn't too restrictive. It really only locks you out of the couple level 2s you might be playing, and then your level 3 cards like your early play healers or your level 3 combos. But it gives you access to a huge card pool for most decks that you're going to build and most of the cards you want to be searching, especially early. So I think it is actually a pretty great card. I do see a lot of lists in JP that are playing multiple copies of this. Then we've got this Okaroon, this huge occult discovery Okaroon. There's really nothing special about this. It is just an on-play, pay 1, clock yourself from top of deck. Ricky, search your deck for level 1 or lower character. It's a very standard Ricky. It does not have any other effect at all, which is a tad disappointing. But it is still nice that there is a search Ricky in the set. Sometimes sets don't always get them. They just get salvage Rickies, or sometimes sets don't get Rickies at all. So while it's nothing extraordinary and it doesn't have a second effect going for it, it is still something that is good for any set to have, and it is nice that the set does have it. We also have this green Ira. She's just a Rico. Rico, for anyone who doesn't know, is just a card that is when you play it out, you can discard a card, reveal the top card of your deck, then you salvage a character from your waiting room whose level is equal or less than the level of the card you revealed off the top of your deck. Ricos are the best sort of stockless hand filter in the game, in my opinion. Not every While more and more sets are getting them in recent years, not every set gets them, or not every set gets them at level 0. Sometimes sets will get them, but they will have them at level 1 or higher, which means then you start have to worry about colors once you get to level 1 and higher. Ricos, it's always great to have it on a 0. Means you don't have to worry about color at all, so even if she's the only green you play, which is probably unlikely considering how good green is in the set, but it is always nice to have it. Definitely not something you want to take for granted and assume that your set is going to have it. Definitely something that's not bad to just plop even a couple of copies in your deck. You just ditch extra climaxes, grab playable cards. Sometimes you get lucky and you reveal level 3s, so you could grab your level 3 pieces, or even level 1, so you could get your level 1 combos. At worst, you're seeing a level 0 and you're grabbing something like the Momo on the left, or your Ricky, or a Brainstorm, or something like that. So I really enjoy Ricos. I think they all have a lot of value to them. Lately, we have seen Ricos off more and more so do second effects that are getting better and better. This does not do anything else, and it is pretty weak considering that it doesn't do anything else, at sitting at only 1,000 power. But I think that's perfectly fine. Generally, from my experience playing, I will play a level 0 Rico, just because it's a Rico. And any good secondary effect is just a bonus. So this is really, I still play this just because it does what I want, and it just doesn't have that bonus factor going for it, which is still fine. Next up, we have this Chosen Pretty Girl Ira. For anyone who's not familiar with Dandadan, you will see Pretty Girl and Ira pop up a lot together. It is very flavorful with the show. She's very obsessed with her looks and how pretty she is and how pretty everyone thinks she is in the show. So many of her cards will just talk about how pretty she is. But the first card on the left, that is from the trial deck. When she attacks, you pick one of your human or strange characters, which are the two big traits in the set, so pretty much anything. Pick it, gets 1500 power until end of turn. Now she can choose herself, which is very good because she is also a clean cut. So for anyone who doesn't know, that's when a character gets a reverse. You pick one of your other characters, you rest it, and you move it to an open position of your backstage. The clean cuts are generally very good cards to give you stockless advantage early on in the game. It's a way to save one of your characters so that you could attack with it the following turn. And since you're saving it, that's one less character that you have to dedicate from your hand to your stage the following turn. You can get a reverse on something, and then you could rest it and move it back, so you could crash with it. Whatever it is, they're always, in my opinion, cards that are nice when a set does have them at 0, and you can give the power to itself, which would mean that it's swinging for at least 3k if you give its power to itself before any other sort of buff. But the fact that you can give it to something else does give her value throughout the course of the game. That 1500 power is nothing to sneeze at. Clean cuts generally sort of lose some of their value after level 0. Not always, but definitely in general they aren't as useful past 0. But this one can still be relevant because she will still give power on attack to anything on stage when she attacks, which can help you get over some things. Next we have this TV anime Dandadan Okaroon. He is 500. However, if all of your characters are human or strange, he gets 3000 power. So even if he's the only character on your stage, he will be 3500, which is pretty good. His second effect is when he becomes reversed, if your hand has 4 or more cards, you reveal the top card of your deck. If it's level 1 or higher, you may return this Okaroon to your hand. Very often we see sets that will have these sort of 3500 profiles. Very often they'll be runners or chasers, so they'll move around to a different position of your center stage during your opponent's start of your opponent's attack phase. He does not run, however, he is definitely still a very good card because he has a good chance to bounce back to your hand, or at least maybe if not a good chance, a decent enough chance. It is always great to sort of have that effect. He is swinging really big. He should be able to get over pretty much anything your opponent's going to put up at 0. And if you bolster him with the clean cut, if you play both of them, which would be two really good plusing zeros to have in your deck, he will be swinging for at least 5k, which is very, very strong on a zero. And just having the optional bounce back, or the chance to bounce back, is very, very solid. Gives you more hand to play with, means you don't have to spend as much new hand to play out playable attackers the following turn, or you could just discard them off of something like a drop searcher or something like that. A very solid card overall, maybe not the most exciting at face value, but definitely a decent enough level 0. Then we have this pretty girl wrapped in kindness, Ira. Her first effect is if your hand has 5 or more cards, she gets 1,000 power. So as long as you got 5 or more cards, she'll be 3k, and this is cross turn, so no matter which turn it is, as long as you've got 5 cards, she'll be 3k, which is pretty solid. And she's still 2k even if you don't have that, but she is really great going first. She has a second effect, which is also pretty good, where when she's put into your waiting room from the stage, you may reveal up to 3 cards from the top of your deck. If you reveal 1 or more cards, you pick up to 1 to a kinder world, which is an event that we'll talk about later, or a human or strange character. Add it to hand and put the rest into your waiting room, and then discard a card. We see this sort of on death effect pretty often now. It's sort of generally been referred to as a Rize. Largely in the past, these are generally on reverse Rizes, so when they get reversed, look it up to 3, add a character, add it to hand, discard a card. On death is in most situations probably better, because that way you don't see a climax on the reverse, and then you don't cancel because you reveal a climax or more than one climax. It also means that you could trigger it on your turn if you want, if you really need deck speed, or if you just need to dig for a specific character or something. You can overplay this during your main phase and dig a little bit, which is nice. She's a very solid level 0 overall, both in terms of power and what she does. Now, while a lot of people, probably most people, don't actually play the event that she can grab, it is nice to have the option because it's not actually a bad event, but also being able to grab any character is good. Definitely a good card to have in a lot of lineups. She can be green fix if you aren't playing much green. A good card overall that I think will make its way into a lot of lists. Then we've got this Turning the Tables Momo. She's pretty weak at only 500 power. However, she has a very, very interesting effect where when you play her on stage from your hand, you may pay 2. If you do, you search your deck for up to 1 climax with the same name as a climax that is in your waiting room. This can be very helpful if you just need to search for a climax. Sometime, whether it's at level 3 or level 1, whether you just need to sort of pay out stock, maybe you triggered too much stock, too many climaxes the previous turn, and you just want to pay them out. Being able to use 1 card to pay out 2 stock can be helpful. It's not something that will necessarily pop up into every deck, but it is something that is nice to have as the option. She does have a secondary effect where when you play her and place her on stage from hand, which is sort of interesting wording. Generally, they will just say when you place the character on stage from hand, playing her means that you have to actually play her, so she can't be summoned from your hand by some other effect. She will miss it then. But when you play and place her on stage from hand, you may discard any card. If you do, you choose 1 Tenacious Pursuit Okaroon or Full Throttle Pursuit Okaroon in your waiting room, and you add it to your hand. Those are level 3 combo pieces that we are going to discuss later. So she bonds to a specific level 3 combo, which isn't bad to have if you're playing that combo, to have it also tied to that first effect. She is something that is like a tech piece that you would probably just play as a one of. The bonder is not necessary, so if you're not playing that level 3 combo, you can still just throw her in a deck. If you just need to be searching for climaxes or would like to have the option to search for climaxes. Fortunately, none of the top ends in this set are particularly stock heavy. The Okaroon specifically does seem stock heavy at first glance because one of them is a pay forward end of attack, but there are a lot of ways to mitigate that cost, which we're going to talk about later. So because none of the top ends are really stock heavy, this pay 2 isn't as detrimental as it might seem in another set where you have to pay more stock to do your finishers, so you can sort of afford to use that stock. and maybe loop your level 1 combo, or just grab your level 3 if you don't have it once you hit level 3, or whatever it might be. Definitely a very interesting card that I thought is cool to have. I always like having that option. Moving on to the level 1 combos, I think this is really where the set shines. While I did highlight in the previous slides some good zeros, and I think there are definitely more zeros than what I pictured that are just solid cards to throw in. There's not a ton that is necessarily the most spectacular, but there's also a lot that is good. While of course there are some filler level zeros in the set, there is a decent enough number of good ones. Just not a ton of great ones. I think the level 1 combos in the set, however, are where things sort of start to change, particularly with a level 1 green combo that we will look at. There is, I think, 2 level 1 combos that I'm not going to cover because they're not really that great. They're not worth talking about. So I'm only highlighting the ones that I think are good for various reasons. Starting off with this Occultic Daily Life Ochre Rune. When he's placed on stage from hand, if you have another human or strange character, he gets +1 level and 3500 power until end of turn. He is on a choice climax. Notably, he is a 1/0 on a choice climax with a soul trigger. That is really, really great. That is very, very important. It means you could pick up your level 1 combo when you trigger a choice, which is pretty great. A downside to what I just read, though, is the fact that he does gain a level. While this is something that I think won't come up very often, when you play him out at level 1, it does technically mean that he's level 2, which means your opponent can use an anti-change backup against him. Now, most sets, if you're only just hitting level 1, your opponent is probably around level 1 or so. They're probably not level 2. The majority of sets, they don't have anti-change backups until level 2. Some do have them at level 1, like this set, for example. It does mean he is technically susceptible to an anti-change backup, which could sort of stink. I think most of the time, though, your opponent's not going to waste the resources on it, but it is something to keep in mind. I think the advantage, because that is a major disadvantage, I guess, even if it's unlikely to really come up. One advantage of gaining a level is that he will dodge level 1 bombs that your opponent might have on board. It's not something that most people probably have to worry about too much in this day and age, but if you're the most common bomb you're going to see is a level 1 or lower bomb, and he will be able to play around that since he will be level 2 the turn you play him, which is nice in those niche matchups. Now his actual climax combo is when he attacks, if you have the choice climax, you can discard a card. If you do, you do the following action 2 times. You look at up to 3 cards from the top of your deck. You choose up to 1 Sacred Ball, which is a 1/0 yellow event, or a human or strange character from among them, reveal to your opponent, add to hand, put the rest to waiting room. I think this combo is not necessarily the most broken thing we've ever seen or anything like that. He does give some pretty decent deck speed and deck control. You get to look at up to 3 cards twice. So if you really don't want to do too much digging, if you're pretty compressed and you got a lot of climaxes in there, you can just look at one, see a character, add it, look at another one, see a character, add it. But if you also need to go through your deck, you also can look at up to 6, which means that this Ochre Rune could process potentially up to 7 cards when you count his attack. I don't think the discard 1 on attack is really that big of a deal to activate the effect. I think you just most of the time should have some dead card that you don't want, and you will be able to just ditch it. I think it's a decent enough amount of cards you look at where you should see something that you like between the 2 times you use the effect. I think its biggest advantage is that it is a 1/0 on a choice with a soul trigger, which is important if you are planning to play a choice. I think this is the only level 1 choice combo in the set. A choice does incentivize you to sort of play it. We're going to talk about the level 3 choice combo later. You could pair this card with this 1/0, which is also a 1/0 with a choice. This was originally released as a promo in Japan, but they added it to the main booster in the English release. If you have a climax with choice in its trigger icon in your climax area, this Occultic Summer Ochre Rune in all of your zones gets choice trigger, This means that you can effectively, instead of if you're playing 8 choice, you add 4 copies of this card to your deck. Now it's like you're playing 12 choice, which we have seen before in past sets. I have played it, particularly with the Ichika from Quince has a card that is pretty much identical to that effect. I've enjoyed that immensely. That one, though, does not have a soul trigger. This one is still a 1/0 with a soul trigger. I have found from playing the game for years that a big problem with 8 choice decks is that they actually, ironically, tend to not. They have a lower choice count than a lot of decks because choice does not have a soul trigger. Level 1 combos typically won't have a soul trigger. Lately, Bushiroad seems to sort of be trying to make that not as much of a problem because they are giving more of these 1/0 choice combos at level 1 a soul trigger to sort of make up for that. And here is another 1/0 with a soul trigger so it adds more soul triggers to your deck, and he also becomes a soul choice trigger while you've got a choice climax in your climax area. Now he does have another effect, which is when you have another human or strange character, he gets +1 level and 5500 power. So he'll be 6k during your turn, as long as you're playing the game, which is fine enough if you do have to swing with him. Now, aside from the first effect of him becoming a choice trigger, which is very, very important and is very good, he has a third effect, which is absolutely busted in the 8 choice deck, or if you are even just doing 4 choice, but you're playing the level 3 choice combo. We're going to get into more of what he does later, but he directly supports that. But I think this card specifically does help encourage you to play 8 choice. I do think the level 1 Okarun on the left is definitely not a bad climax combo. It's not the best level 1 climax combo in the set, but I think it is just good enough and has just enough going for it where it is worth considering, especially if you want to play 8 choice or 12 choice, or if you do just like Okarun, or if you just like choice. Next up for level 1 combos, we have this Fashion is the battle uniform for, I can't read what that says, it's too small. Momo, she's from the trial deck. She is on a door climax. If all of your characters are human or strange, she gets 2000 power. That is cross turn, so she will be 6k defensively, which is actually pretty good for a level 1 combo, especially a level 1 combo from the trial deck. Then her climax combo is when she attacks. If you have the door climax, you have 2 or more other human or strange characters, put the top 3 cards of your deck into your waiting room, choose 1 level X or lower character in your waiting room, and return it to your hand. X is equal to the number of characters put into your waiting room by this effect. This is for a trial deck combo. It is pretty decent. I do like it. It's on a door. I think door is a pretty solid trigger. There is a lot in the set that sort of encourages you gently to play 8 door. I think if you're a fan of Momo, this is also a pretty solid level 1 combo to have for her. She does have another level 1 combo in the set, which we're not going to talk about. It's a standby combo that I don't think is particularly that great. It's whatever. But I think this is a solid combo. I think the weakness of this combo is that you must mill 3. You do not have an option to mill up to 3. Which sometimes with certain deck states does sort of stink, where you maybe don't want to have to mill that much. Maybe you're in a good deck state and you got some compression going for you, and you don't want to just start mill. You would mill a bunch of climaxes, and you don't want to do that, but you don't really have a choice. It is just in general nice in Weiss when a card gives you the option to do something. And this one is just a hard you must mill 3. I still think it's a good card overall. It's got enough good stuff going for it where it is fine, especially if you like Momo, or even if you just picked up a couple of trial decks to put together. I think this is a perfectly acceptable level 1 combo. She does have some support around her. This direct piece of support would be this A Wonderful Friend, Momo. When she's placed on stage from hand, you look at up to 4 cards from the top of your deck. You choose one of your level 1 combo, pictured on the left there. You put it on any position of your stage, and you put the rest to waiting room. You don't have to discard a card or have any cost other than playing her out to do that. So even if you do see the Momo, you do summon her out, you don't actually have to discard a card, which would be the normal sort of cost for something like this. Now it is only looking at 4, so it is going to whiff a lot or a decent amount. And if you are playing this level 1 Momo combo, you might not think that this card is even worth playing. But I think it's kind of a funny card. It is decent if you just want some free, costless, completely costless deck speed. Um, it's a funny card. It's interesting enough. I don't necessarily mind it. I'm not sure if I would throw it in my deck. Maybe I would. It's tough to say. But it is nice that it does exist. I think it's better than it not existing. It does support a decent amount. And it's fun enough. There is also this 1/1 event, which is if it doesn't directly support the level 1 combo, but it just sort of supports door combos in general in this set. It's a 1/1 event that says if you do not have a human or strange character, you can't play it from your hand. But when you do play it, you search your deck for one climax with a door and a trigger icon, reveal it to your opponent, put it to your hand, shuffle your deck. Then you may choose one card in your level and one card in your waiting room and exchange them, and then you put this event into your memory. So for one stock, you get to search your deck for a door climax, and you get a little bit of memory compression. And if you really need it, you can do some level swapping, which red specifically is, I think, the only deck where level really matters. I think there is a card in green that has some stuff going on with the level, but I think pretty much it's really just red that cares the most about having certain cards in level. So this does do 3 pretty decent things all for one stock, and you don't have to choose between doing any of those things. You get to just do as many as you feel like, which is pretty nice. Being able to search your door climax means it's pretty easy to either, once you hit level 1 and you don't have your level 1 door climax, if you're playing this Momo, you can search it out right away, or on subsequent turns you can loop the Momo pretty easily. Notably, this event does make it so that the level 1 Momo combo on the left here, it doesn't whiff because you, at worst, you can just grab a level 0 as long as a level 0 is there. But the level 1 Momo combo only lets you salvage level X or lower, and X is equal to the number of characters, so events does lower the threshold of the level of the character that you can grab. But I still think this is a fun and interesting card. It's nice generally when an event lets you grab a climax. In the past, it has a higher cost to it. I think for one stock, this card does do a lot. It may not show up in a ton of things, but I think it's always nice to have that option. So yeah. Next up for level 1 combos, we have this Because I'm the Chosen One Ira. I think this is the level 1 combo that pretty much anyone that talks about Dandadan in a positive light, they specifically reference this card. This is a 1/0 with a soul trigger, yet again. This combo is on a bar, which is pretty great. She is, during your turn, if you have 2 or more other characters, she gets 3000 power. And then her climax combo, if anyone is familiar with Hololive, she is just the Kali level 1 choice combo from that set, except she is on a bar. When she attacks, if you have the bar climax, and you have 3 or more other human or strange characters, you put up to 4 cards from the top of your deck into your waiting room. You choose up to 1 level X or lower character in your waiting room, return it to hand, and this Ira gets 1000 power until the end of turn. Now X is equal to the total number of cards with Soul Trigger in their trigger icons put into your waiting room by this effect. This Kali is a pretty great card, pretty solid. This Ira is just like that, except on a bar, so she's in green. This gives you very selective mill, unlike the Momo we just looked at, which I still think is a decent combo. This one is up to 4, so you can stop at 1 if you want, or 2 or 3, whatever you want. Or something for anyone that is a bit newer and was wondering, this is for, she salvages based on the number of cards you mill that have Soul Trigger in their trigger icons. She does not salvage based on the number of trigger soul triggers that were in the trigger icon. So if you happen to be playing some sort of 2 soul or stock soul or whatever might be in the set, it does not count that as 2 soul triggers. It just counts it as a card with a soul trigger icon, so it would still only have 1. I don't think that's going to really matter too much, but just in case anyone was wondering, this is a really, really good combo. This is pretty much from everything I've ever seen, the only combo people really talk about from the set at level 1, and for good reason. It is very solid. It does also have some support behind it, whether it's direct support or slightly indirect support. We've got this Avow to Protect You Acrobatic Silky, which is really, really great when paired with this Ira. This Silky has two effects. The first is that when your climax with bar triggers, you may discard one card. If you do, draw a card. She's not the best sort of bar. You can discard, for anyone who's wondering, you can discard the bar that you just triggered once you add the bar to your hand. So you could get the bar out of your hand rather than let it just stay in your hand if you don't want it. Very often we see this sort of bar filter support. Typically, it'll be some variation of you might be able to discard a card to salvage a character, which is better than this, or maybe grab a card from your clock and then put the top card of your deck into your clock, something like that. I think the draw is still good enough for when you, because it is optional, but also when you just want to get the bar out of your hand. I think they sort of made it a draw instead of like a salvage because they were trying to balance it, because her second effect is when your other character with Ira in its card name is put into your waiting room from the stage. If this Silky is in your backstage, you may send the Silky to your waiting room. If you do, you return that Ira to its previous stage position as rest. Now, this is an effect that we see in most sets where we have these sort of level 0 saver profiles, where when they're in the backstage, if you have a character leave the stage, you can basically just save it. Typically, not always, but typically it will save any character. This one only saves Ira's, which is fine when you realize why this card exists. This is a 0/0 with a soul trigger, which is very important in a bar when you're playing the level 3 Ira. It is also very flavorful. For anyone who hasn't seen the show, Silky has this whole relationship with Ira, but I think the fact that she only saves Ira is because they were really trying to balance this card. They were trying to make it do the most that it could for the Ira deck specifically. It's important, and we'll learn once we get to the level 3 combos, why this 0 specifically having a soul trigger is very good. The level 3 Ira wants to see soul triggers. As you can see, the level 1 Ira wants to see soul triggers, so having level 0s with soul triggers is good to start with. The bar filter is decent enough. If you do have 2 copies of this Silky out, you can actually discard 2 cards to draw 2 cards, which is an option if anyone wants. But also the fact that this saves Ira means that you can pretty easily loop this level 1 Ira combo, and because the Ira level 1 combo is on a bar, it's already super easy to loop. Definitely much easier when compared to other triggers like Choice or Door or Standby. So definitely a very solid card. It has just enough going for where in the 8-bar list that most people would be playing, she is very important in the deck and is a very good card. She doesn't really have much value outside of that, because you're not really going to be playing much Ira if you're not playing 8-bar. But in that deck specifically, very good, does a lot of good support. There is also this Occultic Girl Ira on the right there. She is a 0/0. She is a Salvage Brainstorm, which is just naturally very good to have a Salvage Brainstorm. She's at 15, which isn't terrible in terms of power. Her first effect, though, is all of your level of this level 1 Ira on the left here, the level 1 combo, plus the level 3 Ira combo that we'll look at later. All of those characters, they get 500 power, which doesn't really matter, but is still fine. And the following ability, that when they attack, you look at the top card of your deck and you put it on top of your deck or into your waiting room. Now, this is incredibly important for the level 3 Ira, which we'll look at later, but it's still very important for this level 1 Ira. She effectively helps turn all of your level 1 Iras from a potential 4 card mill into a potential 5 card mill. Also, she will let you see if there is a soul trigger on top. If there is, you'll probably just leave it. If there is not, then you could dump it and dig yourself 1 card closer to a soul trigger. So tying that to a Salvage Brainstorm, which you would probably be playing anyway because she's just a Salvage Brainstorm in green, which is important for an 8-bar deck. Tying this first effect to it is really, really strong. The fact that it works on both the level 1 and the level 3 Ira combo is very important. Both of them really want to be milling specific types of cards with soul triggers. So just doing that is really, really good. Plus the 500 power cross turn is just fine enough, I guess. But this combo does have some very good support in it. This is definitely, I think, the most popular level 1 combo that we've seen come out of JP for Dandadan. I think it's probably going to be the most popular level 1 combo to come out of the English meta when people are playing Dandadan. Just a really good card overall. It's the type of level 1 combo, being a 1-0 on a bar with a soul trigger, that makes it very easy to salvage things, and it's very easy to loop, and it's got this really good support behind it. It sets it up really well for set 2, where it's just, I'm not going to say it's future proofed, but it's just a very, very solid combo. There is a reason why people are still playing Caligura to this day, because Cali is just a very strong level 1 combo, and that came out a couple of years ago now, or maybe close to 3 years ago now. I think this Ira is pretty much the same way. Just a really, really good card on a popular girl in a color that's a very good color for the set. It does a lot. Really great combo. I'm very excited to play it myself personally. And that will be it for our level 1 combos. Moving on to our level 3 combos, I think there is enough good stuff in level 3 in terms of combos to keep up the positive momentum from the level 1 combos going. I think level 1 combos were decent. The Ira is the standout, but there are some cool things. I think when I first read the set, when I first read any new set, I typically go straight to the level 3 combos. I want to see how good a deck is at killing my opponent, how good the reach is, how easy it is to triple that combo, that sort of thing. That's just what I like to do. So when I first read the level 3 combos for this set, which was the first cards I read, I was disappointed, and it did kill my enthusiasm for the set. There was only really one that I particularly liked, which would be the Ira that we're going to get to. And even then, it was sort of a very muted sort of liking for it. But now that I've really looked at the set as a whole and seen all the support that various combos have, I do think the level 3 combos in this set are actually pretty good. They don't necessarily have the kill range as some other combos that we have seen in Modern Weiss, but I think there's enough going for them where they are worth playing, especially if you are a fan of Dandadan. To start, we're going to talk about this trial deck combo. On the left here, we've got this level 3 Cursed Power Ochre Rune. When he's placed on stage from hand or by fusion, you may heal 1. And when he attacks, if you have the climax, which is a bar climax, in your climax area, you may pay 1. If you do, he gets 1000 power till the end of your opponent's next turn, and you perform the following action 2 times. Put the bottom 2 cards of your opponent's deck into their waiting room. If there is a climax among those cards, you deal 1 damage to your opponent. For trial deck purposes, I think this combo is perfectly good. This does see some play in JP. Oftentimes you will see some sort of mix-up between multiple level 3 combos in JP. This will often be one of them. For anyone who is a bit newer to Weiss and is wondering what it means by fusion, when it mentions fusion in that first line of text, fusion is a mechanic in Weiss that you typically, if not always, see at level 2, where it involves taking pretty much 2 characters, and you turn those 2 characters into another character, usually a stronger character. Typically, you will use some card to marker another specific character from your stage. Sometimes your waiting room, but usually your stage, and then you will turn that card that just markered something into a stronger card. So here we have this 2-1 Turbo Granny. This is the way to fuse out your Ochre Rune at level 2 if you want. So its effect is when you place it on stage from hand, you can choose 2 of this Curse Power Ochre Rune in your waiting room, and you put them at the bottom of your deck in any order. This is actually very important because of how she brings out the Ochre Rune with her fusion effect. You do want the Ochre Runes in your deck. Her fusion effect is you can put 1 Being a Pest Ochre Rune from your stage face up underneath her as a marker. That Ochre rune is this. It's from the trial deck also. If all of your human or all of your other human or strange characters get 500 power, it is also a pay to rest itself, salvage a character. It's a fine card. It's not the most amazing card. Oftentimes, fusion targets like this aren't necessarily the best cards. Sometimes we do see sets where they are actually pretty decent cards that might be tied to like a staple brainstorm or something like that. I don't think this card is necessarily bad. I don't think it's the most amazing thing ever. But if you do want to fusion and bring out your Ochre rune at level 2 rather than level 3, you will need to play copies of this Ochre rune. So with the Turbo Granny, getting back to her, you will play out the Turbo Granny from your hand. You marker this Ochre rune on the left, put it face up underneath the Turbo Granny as a marker. Then you search your deck for up to one Cursed Power Ochre rune, which is our level 3 combo here, and you put it in the stage position that the Turbo Granny was in, and then you put the Turbo Granny as well as her marker face up underneath the Cursed Power Ochre rune in any order. Then you shuffle your deck. So this is a way to, at the expense of a little bit of extra hand, you cheat out your level 3 combo at 2 if you want. You don't have to do it at 2. It's just an option. You could do it at 3. The level 3 Ochre rune does not need any hand to actually use its effect. It's just a pay 1. So while you do go minus on hand, since you are using 2 cards from your hand to do it, I'm assuming you didn't have the level 0 on the stage, but if you did have it on the stage, you're losing a character on stage to play out this 2 marker to satisfy the marker condition for the Turbo Granny. It is a way to cheat out the Curse Power Ochre rune for 1 less stock and do it at level 2. And you don't have to have the Ochre rune in your hand. You actually need it in your deck, so it's something, 1 less cards to sculpt for. For a trial deck, pretty decent enough package overall. You don't have to use fusion to bring out the Ochre rune. You could just bring them out at level 3 like normal if you don't like fusion. Some people don't like fusion. There is a lot of fusion in this set. Most sets these days don't really get fusion. I don't think it's really been a particularly popular mechanic ever. Most sets don't get them. However, this set has a lot of it because it is very flavorful. For anyone who doesn't know Dandadan, they haven't watched the show, there is a lot of combining people, regular people with cursed spirits essentially, and then the people will gain special powers. Ochre rune is just a normal human who basically gets he fuses a little bit with Turbo Granny on the right and then gets some of her powers and turns into this white-haired guy with super strength and speed and all that. A lot of the characters in this show that happens to them, so there is a lot of fusion. I think that was just Bushiroad trying to be flavorful, which is nice when they put in that little bit of extra effort. Very often fusion kind of feels like it's not worth it. However, with a lot of the fusions in this set, they're actually pretty reasonable to cost. I think this trial deck package is pretty decent. It's really, really great that the Turbo Granny will put the Ochre rune back into your deck from the waiting room, which is where she will fuse the Ochre rune from. So it's always nice to be able to guarantee that you've got an Ochre rune in your deck. So it's solid enough overall. At the end of the day, this Ochre rune combo is, at most, it's burn 1 twice. I think the big advantage to it is that you can bring it out pretty cheaply at level 2. It means you can heal at level 2, and because it will sit pretty big cross turn, it will sit at 11k before any backups or any sort of assists. There is a pretty good chance that it will survive, and because it is on a bar, it's very easy to loop. So you can just loop it the next turn. It doesn't need any hand. You will have at least 1 stock left over, so it should be easy enough to loop it if you really need to. A decent combo overall. Next up, we have this level 3 Momo combo. That's against the rules Momo. She is on a standby climax, which is important. Her climax combo is during your climax phase, when she's placed on stage, by the effect of the standby climax, you may pay the cost, which is pay 2, and then send one of the climax from your climax area to your waiting room. If you do, you stand this Momo and you choose another copy of her in your waiting room and you put it on any position of your stage. Now, the copy that you summon does not, well, I guess it doesn't say it comes out resting or standing. I'm recording this late and I forget how it comes out. But I would guess that it comes out standing because it doesn't say it comes out resting. But we have seen this sort of level 3 standby ability before on a character, notably in Avatar. There is a Zuko and an Aang where you standby out one copy, starting with level 2. You pay the cost and you're able to summon out another copy of itself. So it is a way to get a relatively cheap way to get two pretty big two-soul characters on board, which is pretty nice. And then she has another effect that when she attacks, you could pick up to one card in your opponent's waiting room and you put it on the top or the bottom of their deck. This is pretty interesting. We have seen this sort of effect on level 3s that come out at level 2 before, notably on the Alice level 3 from Nikkei, which on reverse can put your opponent's character on top of the deck. It's a pretty good way to sort of put potential damage, clean damage, on top of your opponent's deck. So that is always nice. I do like that this Momo does it on attack, that she does not need a reverse. This means that if you want or feel that you need to side attack, so you could dodge any change backups, since you are ideally burning this out at level 2 with a standby, you can still side and still get that effect. And I like that you can put it on top or bottom. Something that I have seen a lot of on the JP side is that a decent number of people seem to be doing some mixture of bar and standby, even if it's just one copy of the standby. If your opponent has a big fat deck and they're not going to get to a refresh the following turn, I have watched a couple of games online from the JP side of things, and I saw someone use this Momo to put a climax on the bottom of their opponent's deck because they just refreshed and they had a big fat deck, and the plan was that the next turn they were going to go into the Okaru level 3 that we just looked at, and that one is the one that needs to mill a climax from the bottom. So they put a climax on bottom to set up the Okaru for the following turn so that it would not whiff. Of course, your opponent could always do something to shuffle their deck. I'm not saying that's the ideal play with it. I think 9 times out of 10, you're just going to put a character on top of your opponent's deck so that you make it a little bit easier to stick some damage. But it is nice in certain situations to have the option to put the card on the bottom of your opponent's deck for whatever reason that might be. It's a solid card overall. It's a decent enough standby card. Just getting those two big bodies out at starting with level 2 is nice. It doesn't heal or anything like that, but it is pretty good. Especially I've seen some lists that will do some variation of standby. This standby Momo with the door level 3 Momo. The door level 3 is very, very, very efficient in terms of how much stock it uses, because it replenishes its stock pretty easily on play. So I think some combination of these two things is pretty nice. It's a solid card overall. Unfortunately, 8 standby has barely enough of the normal 8 standby cards that you'd expect to make it as viable, the bare minimum in terms of viability that it would need to be to feel good about playing. In terms of the usual sort of 2-2 profiles and 1-1 profiles, that sort of thing. This set was clearly not designed to bolster 8 standby, though that is a trend that Bushiroad has displayed over the last few years. Overall, though, I still think this is a decent enough card. You're probably not going to base your entire level 3 game around this card, but it is something where you could just throw a copy or two of this specific standby climax into your deck in case you're in a matchup where it might prove beneficial. Next up, we have this Bloomed Psychic Powers Momo. This is the Momo I was sort of just talking about. She is on a door climax. When she's placed on stage from hand, you may choose one copy of the specific door climax that works with this Momo. You pick one copy of that climax in your waiting room, and you can either return it to your hand or you put it into your stock. Then her climax combo is when she attacks. If you have the door climax in your climax area and you have 2 or more other characters, you pick one of the following 2 effects and you perform it. The first is you do a stock shuffle, so your opponent puts all of their stock into their deck, shuffles their deck, then puts the same number of cards from the top of their deck into their stock. Then you look at the top card of your opponent's deck and you put it on the top of their deck or into their waiting room. So she can be a stock shuffle combined with a Mocha 1, which isn't much, but sometimes you'll get lucky and you will see a climax on top, and then you could sort of move it somewhere else so that they're less likely to cancel. So this first effect is decent enough. The other option you have is you pay 1, ditch 1 to burn 2. So not an explosive amount of damage, but she does have a little bit of versatility with her in terms of being able to do the stock shuffle. Now there is a red 2/0 with a soul trigger that we're going to talk about later, but that card is a stock shuffle on its own, and it's a pay 2 stock shuffle. So you do have a stock shuffle in the set already in the same color that doesn't require a climax. But it's still nice that this card has the option. Sometimes you're just not going to be playing the stock shuffle, or you don't have enough stock to do it, or you don't have it, it's somewhere else, and you don't have access to it. Stock shuffles aren't the most amazing thing. Stock swaps are better, but there are certain deck states where if your opponent leaves you a very small deck, leaves themselves with a small deck, and they got a decent amount of climaxes in there, and they have a good amount of stock. Stock shuffles actually are pretty decent. They're still not guaranteed, but if they have a small deck with a lot of climaxes in it and a decent amount of stock, you are more likely, even though you are putting cards back, to at least nab some of them, which is decent. So it is very dependent on deck state and how much stock your opponent has and that sort of thing. But it's nice to have the option. I think the real standout part about this card is the fact that when you play her out, you can grab her climax for free, but you can also put it into stock if need be, which means that you can play her out for a very low stock threshold. You play her out, you put the climax to your stock, which means you effectively played her out for 1 stock, and then you play out the next copy and you put the climax back into your stock, and then you play out your 3rd copy and you can either put it to stock or add it to hand depending on what you need. There is a lot of versatility with it. We've seen plenty of climax level 3 climax combos such as like Maureen that sort of mitigate the cost of playing them out, and there's a lot of benefit to that, even if their actual burn damage is on the lesser side. We have seen that being able to just save resources means that you can use those resources on other things, and there is a lot of value to that. So I think there is a lot of value to this Momo. I think it's a perfectly solid level 3 combo, and I am looking forward to playing it. I do like Momo a lot, but I think it has enough versatility going for it, and it has just enough going for it to make it work. 8 door is definitely not bad in the set. Red is a good color in the set. So I think it's a fun combo. I do expect to see a decent amount of it. I've seen a lot of lists from people who, because she grabs her own climax, they can have a lot of fun with the rest of the deck, and they could have more than 2 climax combos in their deck because how easy it is to just make it work with this Momo, which is fun. I think being able to grab her own climax and send to stock or waiting or add it to hand, it does allow some very interesting things in terms of deck building, and I would expect to see that sort of creativity in Dandadan decks now that the set is out, all because of this card. So I think it's a lot of fun. Next up, we have this acrobatic pretty girl Ira. Don't let that face fool you. This is the same Ira that we looked at earlier with the level 1 combo. This Ira is probably the one that most people talk about in terms of level 3 combos, and has probably seen the most success on the JP side. I don't expect Dandadan to really be a set that in English is really going to do too much at regionals. However, Weiss is a game where pretty much anything can top at any time if they have a good enough day, and Dandadan is a competent enough set overall where at some point it is going to get some sort of regional top in English, because it is a competent enough set. It is not particularly the best at anything that it sets out to do, but it is far from the worst in any area. It has good cards at every level, and this IRA level 3 has just enough going for it where if the set tops a regional at some point, it's probably going to be with this combo, because it has so much support behind it, and it does put out damage, and it's on bar, which is always great. 8 bar feels really, really good in this set, where I think this is a fun combo to look at. So now let's actually look at it. When you play her on stage from your hand, or when she's brought out by fusion, which we'll discuss her fusion requirement in a bit, you may choose one human or strange character in your clock, and you may put it on the bottom of your deck. This is okay. There are certain niche situations where you would like them to be on the bottom of your deck. And we'll talk about those in a minute. It does sort of stink that she does not heal events. She does not heal climaxes. And more often than not, it's probably not the greatest thing that she's putting them back into your deck, because she's putting clean damage back into your deck. I guess she can't heal climaxes because it'd be unfair to put them back into your deck. But it would have been nice if she just healed to waiting room, to be honest. But a healer is a healer. Hopefully, when you play this out, you're killing your opponent anyway. She can be brought out at level 2 with fusion, so it's not as bad, especially if you start spamming multiple copies of this at 2. It sort of does mitigate the fact that you're putting clean damage back into your deck. Now, her climax combo is when she attacks, if you have the bar climax in your climax area and you have another human or strange character, you may discard a card. If you do, you deal 1 damage to your opponent, then you put the top card of your deck into your waiting room. If that card is a card with a soul trigger and its trigger icon, or it is a bar climax, you may deal 1 damage to your opponent. So she is a Cocachino with extra steps. For anyone who doesn't know, that is just a colloquial term used to describe a card that is effectively just burn 1 twice. However, this Ira is not a guaranteed burn 1 twice. As long as you pay the cost, she is a definite burn 1, with the optional potential burn 1 for a second time. So she can whiff, which would stink, because at that point she has just burn 1, which isn't really that great. But the deck does have so much going for it, and we'll talk about what those things are in a moment, to really sort of maximize the chances of you milling a card with a soul trigger or a bar climax. Most of the time you're going to be playing this with the level 1 Ira combo that we looked at in the last slide. That is the 1-0 that's on a bar, which is important for this. It's also the 1-0 with a soul trigger, which is also very important for this combo, because you're just adding all these extra cards into your deck that make it so that you're less likely to whiff on the condition, so that way you get the burn 1 twice. Now let's talk about how you bring her out via fusion. This acrobatic silky on the right is the way that you fuse into this level 3 combo. When you play the acrobatic silky onto your stage from your hand, you choose up to 2 of the acrobatic pretty girl Ira, that's the level 3 combo, in your waiting room, and you put them at the bottom of your deck in any order. So that's pretty much identical to the Turbo Granny fusion that we looked at with the Okaroon level 3 combo. It's always nice when your fusions do that. Then the actual condition to do the fusion is that you put 1 copy of this pretty girl has arrived Ira from your stage underneath this acrobatic silky as a marker. If you do, you search your deck for the level 3 combo. You put it on the same stage position that this acrobatic silky was in, and then you put the acrobatic silky and all her markers underneath that level 3 as markers in any order, and shuffle your deck. Now, this pretty girl has arrived Ira is probably it's definitely, I think, better than the fusion marker requirement that the Okaroon level 3 combo that we looked at earlier has. what this Pretty Girl Has Arrived Ira does is when you place her on stage from, when she's placed on your stage from your waiting room, you choose up to 2 characters with Acrobatic Silky in their card names, and you return them to your deck and shuffle your deck. Sorry, I was just reading that a couple of times because I've thought that it had to be when you place it on stage from your hand, or at worst when she goes from stage to waiting room. I have to double check that. That could be a misprint, which Bushiroad has been doing a lot lately, actually, because otherwise you'd have to stand by her out, unless I'm missing something that brings her out. But whatever it is, she's also a helmet, so you discard a card and you put her from your stage to your waiting room to salvage any character. Definitely not a bad card. Helmets are always pretty good all the time if a set has them. They're good one-ofs in a set. Because she is your fusion condition, you're probably going to be playing at least 2 copies of her, but she's something you don't feel bad about playing 2 or more copies of, because she does do a decent amount. She's not the most explosive fusion target ever, but she is pretty decent. So this Acrobatic Pretty Girl Ira, aside from being able to come out and start healing and start doing extra damage at level 2 if you bring her out via fusion, she also has some good support behind her. We've already taken a look at this Occultic Girl Ira when we were talking about the level 1 Ira combo, but just as a reminder, she's a Salvage Brainstorm who also gives the level 1 Ira as well as this level 3 Ira that we're looking at here. The ability gives a 500 power, and the ability that when it attacks, you can look at the top card of your deck, put it on top of your deck or into your waiting room. This is very important because both Iras, but especially this level 3 Ira, they want to be seeing soul triggers on top of your deck, soul triggers or bar climaxes. So this Ira lets you top check on attack, so if you see something that is not a soul trigger or a bar climax, you can just dump it, and that helps ideally dig you 1 card closer to a soul trigger or to a bar climax, so that you can mill it off of this Ira and get that additional instance of burn. Having that effect is just very good overall, because obviously this card needs that, but tying it to a Salvage Brainstorm, which is something you'd want to play anyway, is very, very good. They very easily could have just made this worse by giving it that ability, that first ability, but not really giving it any sort of secondary ability. So just giving it to something as good as a Salvage Brainstorm means that this card is not a dead card that you are just waiting to use and just stuck holding on to the whole game. You can start using it super early, which is really, really great when they sort of design a card that way, because this one Occultic Girl Ira really does do a ton for the 8-bar list, the 8-bar Ira list. Very, very solid card overall. This was a card that I believe was released as a promo in Japan, and then we eventually, in English, it was just in the main booster for the set. This combo overall is very decent. It's very consistent. Burned 1 twice isn't always the most explosive, but you can bring her out at level 2, which does separate her from most other Kokachinos. She also gets brought out very cheaply, which is pretty important. She does still heal. She does sit pretty big. She is on bar, which means if you use her at 2, it's probably going to be pretty easy to loop her once you get to level 3 the following turn. So there is a lot going for this combo. She is very, very solid. She is not too explosive, but she has a lot of support and just enough positives around her that it makes it a good enough combo to play. Certainly not a bad combo by any means. Just when looked at through the lens of modern level 3 combos, a lot of them are just doing explosive amounts of damage. Things like Gura that are burn 2, then burn 1 twice, and things like Enterprise from Azure Lane Set 2, which is potentially burn 3 twice. Things like that. She feels a little bit muted when compared to, but she also has advantages that those other combos that are a bit more explosive don't have. So I think it's a very fun combo overall. Ira is also a very popular character from the show, so anyone who just likes the show and likes Ira won't be disappointed to be playing this combo. There is a lot to like about it. So moving on to the next level 3 combo that we're going to look at. It's actually 3 characters. Now, these are 3 different cards, 3 different characters. However, they all work on the same level 3 combo, which is a choice combo. Starting off with the Full Throttle Strike Okaroon on the left. He says when you place him on stage from your hand or by fusion, because he's yet again another fusion card, which is a very big theme for this deck, which is very flavorful to the show again. But when you put him on stage from your hand or by fusion, you draw up to 2 cards, choose 2 cards in your hand, discard them, and then you put up to 1 card from the top of your deck into your stock. Now, something to keep in mind, which I do wish was slightly different about this card with that first effect. There is nothing wrong with drawing 2 and ditching 2. It does dig you closer to climaxes or key pieces that you might need. However, while he's draw up to 2, you must discard 2, which can sometimes stink if you're in a deck state. It'd be nice basically if he had the option to draw up to 2 and then you discard the same number of cards that you drew. We have seen that in other profiles, similar profiles before. Like there's a 2-1 Miku combo from Quince that came out in the premium booster where she will let you draw up to 2 and then you discard the same number of cards you drew. So if you draw 0, you discard 0. And sometimes you might just be in a deck state where you don't want to be drawing, but with this you basically have to draw because the discard is mandatory. It's a mandatory discard 2, which does sort of stink. Most of the time it's probably not going to matter, to be honest, but it is something to be mindful about when you are in certain deck states. And most level 3 combos probably wouldn't care about their deck state too much. This Okaroon specifically very much does care about your deck state, specifically how close you are to a refresh, because you generally want to have a decent sized waiting room when you are using this climax combo, and I'll explain why in a moment. However, the draw 2, ditch 2, the dig 2 is like pretty good, and he does blind stock 1, which is pretty nice. It doesn't really matter that he's blind stocking most of the time because his climax combo is going to be paying it out anyway. Now on to the actual climax combo. At the end of his attack, if you have the choice climax, you may pay 4, ditch 1. If you do, you put all markers underneath him if he has any into your waiting room. Then you choose either 1 Tenacious Pursuit Okaroon, which is this Okaroon in the middle here, or 1 of the Full Throttle Pursuit Okaroon in your waiting room, and you put it on the stage position that this card was in, and you put it on the same position that this Okaroon was in, face up underneath this Okaroon as a marker. Sorry, late reading that wrong. You put the card that you summon on the same position of the stage, and you put this Okaroon underneath that level 3 as a marker, and at the end of the turn you exchange those characters. This sounds very expensive, but there is a lot of benefit to doing that. Before I explain the whole interaction of how this whole thing works, let's just review the other 2 level 3 combos here that work on the same climax. We've got first this Tenacious Pursuit Okaroon. When he's placed on stage from your hand or by the effect of the Okaroon on the left, you may heal 1. And when he attacks, if you have the climax and you have 2 or more other characters, he gets the following ability till end of turn. When damage that he deals is cancelled, you may deal 5. Now, there's no cost to that. There's no stock requirement. There's no hand requirement. Nothing like that. Just an on-cancel burn 5. The other Okaroon on the right there is during his attack, you perform a trigger check 2 times on the trigger step. You don't have to pay 1 or anything. This is usually called a twin drive. You don't have to pay 1 stock or discard a card or anything like that to do that. Just trigger check twice. And then his climax combo itself is when he attacks, you may discard 2. If you do, deal 3 damage, and he gets 2,000 power until end of turn. And at the end of his attack, if you do not have a specific Momo, which we'll look at on your board. You put the top 3 cards of your deck into your clock, which does sound bad, but there's ways around it. Now, this whole package is very, very interesting. Pay 4 for the Okarun on the left sounds like a lot until you remember that he does blind stock you on play and he has end of attack. So that pay 4 is kind of more like a pay 2, and you are ideally on 8 choice, so you should have extra stock. Plus, you are getting extra swings because you're summoning a character and then attacking with that character. So it's a little bit easier if you're fielding multiple copies of this guy, which ideally you would be. Plus, there is that 1/0 Okarun with the soul trigger that we looked at earlier that becomes a choice trigger while you have a choice climax out. So you could be playing up to 12 choices in your deck essentially. There is a lot going for this combo. When I first read it forever ago, I really didn't think it was that great. Now that I've looked at the set as a whole, I think there is a lot to like about this combo. I think in general, the rule of thumb with Weiss for many years now has been that your level 3 combo is basically going to be 6 instances of damage. Assuming you play 3 copies of it, you'll get 3 swings, and then you will get 3 instances of burn damage of some varying amounts. Or if it's a restander, you'll get 6 swings, that sort of thing. That in recent years that has changed a little bit, where more and more cards are starting to do more than the extra instance of damage. But what I think is really interesting about this Okarun is that with little setup and maybe a little bit of luck and a little bit of skill, you can get 6 attacks potentially if you try field this. Plus, you can get even more instances of damage depending on if you summon the Tenacious Pursuit Okarun in the middle, and then you get a cancel out of it, and then you burn 5. Or if you summon the Full Throttle Pursuit Okarun, and you just do the discard 2 to burn 3 straight up. I think being able to go from 6 instances of damage to potentially 9 instances of damage is very, very strong. I like that they all work on, obviously they all need to work on the same climax combo to make this whole thing work. So it is on choice, which is choice is great because it's very versatile depending on what you need. Hand or stock is pretty important for this specifically. I like that the Full Throttle Strike Okarun summons the character from your waiting room. If it was summoning it from your hand, that would be pretty terrible. But from your waiting room is pretty great. But because it summons from waiting room, that is what I meant when I was talking about how you gotta sort of watch your deck state with this guy. Because if you don't have a waiting room, you have nothing to summon. So if you do hit a refresh at any point during your attack phase, you sort of do lose the characters you were going to summon. Now, he is pay 4, which does seem like a lot. However, because you're on choice, you can just start shoving these characters you want to summon, the Okarun in the middle and the one on the right, you can just sort of shove them into your stock whenever you trigger a choice. That way you know where they are, so that even if you do hit a refresh, if you just sort of shove them into your stock, you can pay it out with the Okarun on the left, and at that point, they will be in your waiting room, so you can summon them out even if you did hit a refresh, which is just pretty nice to have that as an option. Now I want to talk about the fusion aspect of this combo, because he can be brought out with fusion. Now, out of the I think it's 3, it could be 2, I forget, it's been a long video. Out of the other fusions that we have seen with this set, this is probably it's by far the worst fusion mechanic of the ones that we've looked at. You fuse them out with this Strange Entity Turbo Granny, who is a 2/1 yellow. On play, you can pay 2. If you do, you refresh yourself, which is a very hefty cost. You would really only want to do that when you need to get your level 3 Okarun back into the deck so that you could play it out. However, the other ones that we looked at, they just sort of put them from your waiting room for free. This one makes you pay 2, which really stinks. Then this Granny, when you play her out, if you want to do the fusion, you can marker this Okarun on the left, And then if you do, you search your deck for the Full Throttle Strike Okaroon, put it on the stage position that this granny was in, and then this granny and all of its markers go underneath the Okaroon as markers. Now, unlike the other fusions that we looked at, where the fusion, the card that you had a marker to do the fusion, were decent enough cards, this Okaroon kind of is pretty bad. He is a level 0 that says rest him, choose one of your characters, give it 2500 power until the end of turn. Now, 2500 power is a lot, but power is not everything in this game. He doesn't really plus you cards or anything like that. There's nothing you'd be playing at level 1 that really needs a reverse that badly. So he definitely has the least utility. He's something that you can't really just plop in a back row and feel good about. At least with the others, you could be doing things with them, but you either have to be holding on to in your hand, or you just have to shove him into your back row and leave him there, and he takes a slot of like a brainstorm or something like that, and that really does just sort of stink. So I don't think fusion is really the way to go with this mechanic. I think the level 3 combo itself has the potential to be explosive enough on its own to where you could just play it out at level 3 and it's fine. You don't have to play it out at 2 like the others sort of benefit from playing them early, because they just have more going for them, and it's easier to loop their combos because they are on bar. This is on choice. It's a little bit harder to loop. So I think fusion is not really where it's at with this one in particular. You do have the option. No one's saying you can't, but you don't have to. Now we will look at briefly. This Momo is the Momo that is mentioned on the Full Throttle Pursuit Okaroon, where if you don't have this Momo out and you use the Okaroon effect on the right there, then you have to basically clock yourself 3 times, which does stink. Unfortunately, this Momo is not particularly great either. It's a 2-0 with a soul trigger, which is fine enough, I suppose. But all it does is pump power. It has no real effect outside of plussing power. It's during your turn, all of your other characters with Okaroon in their names get 500 power, which is pretty weak. And then it is a frontal assist for 1000, which is decent enough, I guess. But it's really only going to be played so that you don't clock yourself. I have seen people discuss where, because this Momo is not a requirement with that Okaroon, that people just sort of don't even play this Momo sometimes. They just go all in, and it's either go big or go home. They're either killing their opponent with this combo or they're losing anyway. So clocking yourself 3 times is really not that big of a deal, because you're probably not going to win the game at that point anyway if you didn't kill them by the end of that turn. But just in case anyone was wondering, this is the Momo that you would use. Now, this other card we're going to look at is the one we looked at when we were looking at our level 1 combos with the level 1 Okaroon choice combo from earlier. This is the card, as a brief reminder, that gets a choice trigger when you have a choice climax in your climax area, so you could get 4 extra choice triggers, which is very strong. However, I said we would look at this card again when we looked at the level 3 combo, and that is because he has a third effect, which is very, very strong, where if your level is 3 or higher, you can send this standing card to your waiting room. If you do, you pick 1 Full Throttle Strike Okaroon in your hand, that's the level 3 on the left there, and you put it on the stage position that this Occultic Summer Okaroon was in. You do not pay any sort of hand, you don't pay any sort of stock. It is a really cheap way to bring out your level 3 combo for essentially free. You save 2 stock. When you bring it out this way, you still get the draw 2, ditch 2, blind stock. The amount of value that this card adds to your level 3 combo is absolutely insane. This is the card that was a promo in JP that came out after the set was released, and then we got it in the main booster when we got it in English. It feels very much like a card that was invented purely to try to boost a set that was just mocked pretty mercilessly on release. They really gave this card 2 incredibly strong effects to just try to boost the power and consistency of this level 3 Okaroon combo as much as possible. I think they largely succeeded. I think this card is insane. I think this card does so much. The pay 4 for the level 3 Okaroon on the left there sounds like a lot, even if you factor in the whole fact that he blind stocks and that he's end of attack and its choice. Pay 4 can still be a lot, but you are just saving 2 stock right off the bat by just bringing out a copy with this guy. It is absolutely an insane card. It makes it so efficient. This card makes it so much easier to just play out 3 copies and be able to resolve all 3 copies of the Summoner Okaroon on the left there, which I think is the ideal play. I mean, that's how you get the most instances of damage. This card is absolutely nuts. It is a must 4 of in any deck that is playing this level 3 combo. I think this card alone is what makes this level 3 combo viable if you really want to play competitively with it, even though that still has some weaknesses. I think it's just a lot of fun and it's pretty great. That card is just really ridiculous. This combo as a whole, its strength lies in the fact that it does have a lot of support. Its strength also lies in the fact that it has so much versatility. You have 3 different cards that have 3 different effects that do different things depending on the situation. I mean, you're pretty much always going to need the Full Throttle Strike Okaroon just to summon things and get extra instances of damage. But the fact that it can choose between one of 2 cards that have 2 different effects and 2 different conditions and do 2 different things on play or on attack, there's a lot of versatility behind that. So depending on the situation, you can pick one or the other, and it's just so great to have that option. It makes this combo very modular depending on the situation. If you've got lots and lots of hand, or you want to burn through your deck a little bit, if you want to try to trigger choices for whatever reason, you bring out the Full Throttle Pursuit Okaroon. That's the one on the right. This one guarantees you 3 damage, or at least that you can attempt to deal 3 damage, since it's just on attack, ditch 2, burn 3. The twin drive is pretty nice. The free twin drive is pretty nice. But also the one in the middle is a perfectly viable option because he does just function as a second attacker. So he is an extra instance of damage who has the potential to go into yet another instance of damage by being a cancel burn 5. Now 5 is a big number, but when you're just dealing so many instances of damage, at a certain point your opponent starts running out of climaxes, and he does still heal. It's just this whole combo overall did get me very excited for the set, where when mostly because the 1-0 is absolutely busted, to be honest, but when I read the set as a whole, there is a lot going that sort of makes this very feasible, and the pay 4 on the Full Throttle Strike Okaroon is really not that much when you look at the set as a whole, especially with the 1-0 Okaroon that I've already just heaped so much praise onto, because it is so broken. It is so easy to just play out 2 copies of it, and then, or more I guess if you wanted to, but at least 2 copies to bring out 2 copies of your Full Throttle Strike Okaroon for free. It makes that pay for so much easier to stomach. It's just so good for what this combo is. Now this combo does have some weaknesses, specifically your deck state is a big one. Needing to discard 2 off the Okaroon that you summon to the right can be a problem if you're low on hand, but it does do a trigger check twice. So even though you would, it's just that there's a lot going for this combo, and even though there are weaknesses, there are a lot of strengths to it. It does do enough where I think that it makes up for any deficiencies that it has. And if you're in a situation where maybe you can't get to the Full Throttle Strike Okaroon, you don't need to play the Full Throttle Strike Okaroon, even though you should be playing it out to really maximize how much damage you're doing. You could do some combination of the Tenacious Pursuit Okaroon and the Full Throttle Pursuit Okaroon, whether it's 3 and 3 or 2 and 1 or 1 and 2 or whatever it is, of those 2 cards, if you really need to, or if you want to, or if whatever it might be. So there's just a lot of modularity when it comes to this combo, a lot of versatility. There's a lot of different things you can do, And even though it is some setup and that sort of thing, I think it's a combo that feels very, very good when you're playing it correctly. You get to like sort of stroke your own ego a little bit, in my opinion, where if you really maximize it because you're just a good player who has practiced with the deck a lot and you know what you're doing and you understand your deck state and your opponent's deck state and you know exactly which Okarun is the better Okarun to summon out with the one on the left, um, you just sort of feel pretty good about yourself knowing that you put in the effort to really understand how your deck works and what makes it tick and how to maximize the efficiency and the deadliness of this combo, as opposed to maybe more traditional combos which will just say on attack burn 3 or something like that. I think this set does absolutely everything it possibly could to really just make this combo as good as it can be, or these combos I should say, or these cards that work on the same combo. And I think it's a lot of fun. I think Okarun is a character people like. The art is pretty nice on the cards. I think there just is a lot to like about it. Now, one weakness of it is that it does take up a lot of deck slots, which can be a negative. I don't think the fusion is worth running, so you could save a few deck slots both at 0 and at 2 there. Something that might be more... The only reason, honestly, I would play the Fusion Granny at 2-1 is because she is still an on-play pay 2 refresh, which sometimes might be relevant, but I don't think I would really ever want to play her for the Fusion effect. I just don't think it's worth it. But between this, these 3 cards, some combination, you're probably not going to go 4-4-4. You will probably do some combination of 4-3-2 or 3-3-3 or 3-2-2 or something like that. Though at a certain point you really can't get too low with the numbers because you do need to have them in waiting room. But as long as you're willing to accept that you're going to have a very tight deck list with this combo, especially when you throw in 4 copies of the 1-0 that gains choice that we looked at, you are going to have tight deck space, but I think it's worth it because this combo can do a lot. And it can do a lot for relatively cheap. It reads expensive. Pay 4, ditch 1, and ditch 2. They sounds very expensive, but when you're actually playing it, unless you're having a really rough game and you just don't have a hand at all, which at that point you're probably going to lose anyway. Short of that, it's a lot cheaper than it reads, and it's a lot of fun. I think it's just very, very solid. The Ira is a little bit easier of a combo to set up. The Okarun from the trial deck on the bar is just less setup and just something where you can sort of just slam 3 copies of it, slam the climax, and just hope that things work out. And the Ira is sort of like that easier also, even though you still need a bit more setup because you want to be having a certain board state. It's just less setup than this, but I think this combo feels extremely rewarding if you play it right and you just do it a certain way, and it is a ton of fun. It's just a ton of fun to play. I've enjoyed it in my testing in the simulator. Someone I know, I don't think the simulator officially has Dandadan, but someone made a custom set with Dandadan, and so I've got it from them, and I've tested it, and I've just really enjoyed it, and it's very, very fun overall. It's a combo I would highly recommend testing out. For newer players, I would stick, if you like Okarun, I would just stick with the level 3 from the trial deck. This is something where you got to work your way up to it, but I would start with the one from the trial deck, or the one from the Momo that we looked at, the level 3 Door Momo. That is stock shuffle and a Mocha 1 or a burn 2, and work your way up to that, and then from there you can work your way up to the Ira, and then and this is all for newer players who are just getting into the set. For more experienced players, do whatever you want, I don't care. And then work your way up to this, back to talking to the newbie players, work your way up to this Okarun combo. But that would be it for the level 3 combos. I think I've said enough on them. I think the level 3 combos in this set are perfectly fine. The being able to bring out I guess you could bring out multiple of them at level 2, but Like I said, this Ogre Rune specifically is not really worth bringing out at 2, but definitely the one from the trial deck is worth it. The Ira that we looked at is worth bringing out at 2, and that is a big advantage for them. Being able to heal early, being able to push extra damage earlier than you normally would, being able to loop because they're on bar. There is a lot to like about the level 3 combos in this set, which you wouldn't think if you were just going based off what people have been saying for the past year or so that it's been out in JP. And I can understand at first glance why people would look at them and not think that they're that great, because by modern standards they just feel a little too fair. They're not explosive like Gura, they're not explosive like Mai, they're not as devastating as something like Irons from Overlord. But if you just like Dandadan and you just like Weiss and you just want to play games and feel good about playing a level 3 combo that deals damage or just does some stuff, I think the combos are perfectly good enough. Sometimes that's really all you need. Not everything needs to be topping the set that came out before in terms of how explosive it is. I think if you just like to play the game and you really just like Dandadan, you really can just have a fun time with these combos. And the more I've talked about it and the more I've been looking at it, the more I just firmly believe that you can just do that. And that this set, and particularly the level 3 combos, allow you to do that. Because there really is a lot to like, and there is a lot of support built around many of them. And I think that is something that whether I guess Bushiroad designed it, so they must have intended it. But maybe not everyone appreciated it, including myself. I'll fully admit that when I first read the level 3s, I did stop reading this up because I just didn't like them, which was a mistake on my part. And I only read them because I did wind up watching the show eventually and enjoying it and decided I did want to buy into it. And I was pleasantly surprised. The more I read, the more I thought, the more I tested, that I really think there is a lot to like about the level 3 game in this set. Just like there is a lot to like about level 1 and level 0, definitely more than I thought, definitely more than I think people give them credit for. So I think the level 3 combos do enough where you absolutely can close out games with them. The Ogre from the trial deck is probably, that one is the most reliant on chance and has the least going for it to mitigate the chance factor, but it's definitely something that is still fun and is just splashable enough. And I think I've talked about the level 3 combos in this set enough where people sort of get it. But just to close out this section of the video, definitely a lot to like. Don't dismiss it just based on what other people say or how things read at first glance. Test for yourself. I think with some practice, for anyone who isn't enjoying it, you will see that there is a decent amount to enjoy about it, and you will definitely be able to win games with it. They are not weak by any means, like people like to say, including me for the past year. So I'll take full credit for saying those sorts of things. I was wrong, and I'm happy to be wrong because I do enjoy sets that have good cards in them, that are fun to play from shows that people like, that have playable combos and all that sort of thing. And I think the level 3 combos in this set definitely fit that bill. Moving on to a few notable cards in the set that exist outside of the combos in the set and that sort of thing. These might just be cards that are worth looking at, that can be splashed into a variety of decks, or just sort of interesting profiles. Starting off with cards that are just good in any competitive sort of deck, we have this My Grandma Spirit Medium Psycho, or Seiko. She is a Fumio, pretty cheap Fumio, just on play, pay one, ditch one. Your opponent chooses a climax in their waiting room, and they shuffle everything in their waiting room except that climax into their deck. Fumios are generally very good cards to help decompress your opponent if they leave you just one or maybe two climaxes but a whole bunch of other cards. It's a good way to put a lot of clean damage back into your deck. Not every set gets one. It's always nice when a set has it. It is also one that can be played out at level 2. It's always nice to be able to do it as early as possible. She is also a level 2 or lower reverser. When she becomes reversed, if her opponent's level 2 or lower, she will reverse it. I think we saw this exact profile in this exact color in the exact level, and back in Licorice Recoil, there was the Drunk Waitress Music-key that had this exact effect. Very solid card to have. It's always nice to have the option. There is also this 2/0 Beckoning Cat Turbo Granny. She is a 2/0 with a soul trigger, which is cool, and she can be played from your hand without fulfilling color requirements, and she is an on-play, pay 2 stock shuffle. This is a relatively cheap stock shuffle for anyone that's not playing the Momo level 3 combo we discussed. It's nice to have some sort of decompression option in addition to the Fumio on the left there. Stock shuffles are generally worse than stock swaps, as I've said to death, but Bushiroad seems to have noticed that. They have been moving away from traditional stock swaps for a while. Sets do get them, but more often than not, they're getting stock shuffles these days. However, a problem that I noticed with previous sets is that the stock shuffles were generally unreasonably expensive. They would be just as expensive as a stock swap, often requiring 3 stock, in addition to maybe a hand or needing a full board requirement or something like that. When you just have a regular stock shuffle, having to pay just as much as a stock swap with more conditions isn't really ideal when it's already far inferior to a stock swap anyway. So this card is pretty good overall. Being able to ignore color requirements means that it can be splashed into absolutely any Dandadan deck that you want. It has no field requirements, so you don't need to meet a full field condition like some other stock shuffles have had recently. Pay 2 is pretty reasonable, and it's a 2/0 with a soul trigger. Extra soul triggers is always pretty nice. Sometimes stock shuffles do come up and they do make a difference, especially when you combine them with a Fumio. Doing stock shuffle and then a Fumio can be pretty devastating if things go your way. We've seen that exact combination work to great success in Bochi before. These two cards being in red, even though the color requirement doesn't really matter for the stock shuffle Turbo Granny, does mean that they splash really well into the red Momo deck, and Momo is already a level 3 combo that is so resource efficient and requires such little stock in hand and replenishes both of those very easily that it's not really unreasonable to think that you could do the stock shuffle and the Fumio and then still do triple combo. Even though the Momo does have a stock shuffle tied to it, being able to just do the stock shuffle separately from that and maybe the Fumio separate and then still do triple combo and get your burn 2s off, that often can just be enough to close games if your opponent's deck state is just so. So always nice to have those options. Next up, we have some other cards to look at, some level 1s in yellow, green, and red. First, we have this pretty cool Okaroon on the left there. Ignore his weird face. His effect is an effect that we have started seeing on effects sort of like him more recently, and it's a nice evolution of small but still noticeable power creep when it comes to these sort of effects. His first effect is if he's in your waiting room and you're level 1 or higher, at the beginning of your climax phase, you may discard a card. If you do, you summon him from your waiting room to any position of your center stage. He will come out standing. His second effect is he is just a cost 0 stock bomb. So when he becomes reversed, if his battle opponent is cost 0 or lower, you may put that character into your opponent's stock. Then they put the bottom card of their stock into their waiting room. He is really great for dealing with problem cards. It's always nice to have some sort of cost 0 bomb or level 1 bomb or something like that. What really makes him great is that he can just summon himself for really no cost. You would have to just have a card in your hand anyway. If you were playing it from your hand, it would have to be him. So you're not really like going minus on any resources. So if your opponent's got a problem character out, it's nice to not have to waste resources looking for this guy. As long as he's in your waiting room, you could just burn him out very easily. So it is nice to have that option. It does mean he also, since if you burn him out with his effect, he dodges color requirement. So if you're not playing yellow or you don't have any yellow in your level or your clock, you can still burn him out and still use his effect, which is nice. The only way that would make him better is if he was a 1/0 with a soul trigger. We have seen a lot of cost 0 bombs recently. Happy 1/0s in yellow with soul triggers. But I guess that was sort of the trade-off for being able to summon him from your waiting room. I'd say it's a decent trade-off. Nice to have, even if it's just as a one-of. Sometimes you will just go up against random decks where you do just need to deal with problems, and he helps deal with them. Then we've got this 1/1 event, to a Kinder World event. This event says when you use it, you look at up to 5 cards from top of deck, choose a human or a strange character, reveal it to your opponent, put it to your hand. The rest of the cards that were revealed go to your waiting room, and then you put this event in your memory. And while it's in your memory, at the beginning of your climax phase, you look at the top card of your deck and you put it on top of your deck or into your waiting room. This is a card that doesn't make its way into a ton of lists from what I've seen, but it's in what's arguably the best color in Dandadan, which is green. It's a 1/1 that gives you really good deck speed. Usually this sort of thing would be look at up to 4. This is look at up to 5. So you get a decent amount of deck speed out of it. You're able to grab any character that you see, since everything's going to be strange or human traded, and it goes to memory. So it's a 1 stock deck speed card. Grab something, goes to memory, and then its memory effect is pretty decent for pretty much any deck. It's nice to just have that top check knowledge, and being able to move a card. So if there's a climax on top that you really don't want to go to stock, you can just get rid of it. It's also very important for the Ira deck, being able to just at level 1 and at level 3, we have talked to death how important it is to be able to set up having soul triggers on top, and this is just yet another way to set up what's on top of your deck. So a solid card all around. I think lists, maybe the topping list for Dandadan don't play this, just because it does not have a soul trigger, and that does mess. Ironically, it kind of messes with the decks that it also does help, mostly the Ira deck. Because sometimes realistically, if you shove 2, 3, 4 copies of this into your deck, you're not going to be able to use all of them in a game. I do not believe there is a bonder to this event. Now, there is the level 0 Ira that we talked about when we were discussing the level 0s that can grab this, but she only looks at top 3, so you have to see this in those top 3, which isn't always going to happen. So this would cause those combos to miss, but as long as you're using them, and once you're in your memory, it doesn't really matter. Decent card overall. If with set 2, I assume we're going to be getting more level 1 combos in green and more level 3 combos in green. I could definitely see this being the sort of card that would be splashed into a different type of green deck that isn't so reliant on soul triggers. Good card all around. I am excited to test it. It's also got pretty nice art from a very emotional scene in the show. Not that that's what we use when we rate Weiss cards. Next up, we have this TV anime Dandadan Ira. I think this is a very interesting card that seems to have gone a little under the radar. I've seen some people sort of even mock this card a little bit. She is a 1/0 that is a brainstorm. She's the type of brainstorm where you rest her, flip over 4 cards, and for every climax, she is a excuse me. She is a look at up to 4 cards from top of deck, pick 1, add it to hand, send the rest to waiting room. Now, we have seen this effect a million times on top check 3 brainstorms, except she is a top check 4 brainstorm. While that one card isn't necessarily, something that's insanely broken, I think the fact that there already is a Momo that is a red level 0 brainstorm that is a traditional top check 3 brainstorm, and she has some sort of pretty negligible second effect. I think she gives 500 powers or something. So it seems like by playing this and making the sacrifice that you don't have access to your brainstorm when you're at level 0, in return, they are allowing you to look at up to 4 cards instead of 3. Some games this probably won't matter at all, but it is always nice to have that option. Every extra card you look at is just an extra card in terms of deck speed, if you really need the deck speed, or digging closer to something that you really need. And some games that really is just going to make the difference. I think that there's really nothing wrong with this card. It's very solid overall. It's in a good color. Being green at level 1 does mean that certain decks are naturally just going to steer away from it, like yellow or red, but green is a very good color in this, and I think it is a very solid card overall. If the level 0 Ira brainstorm that we've discussed a lot didn't exist, then I could easily imagine this being a really good brainstorm to toss into the green deck. It's probably not going to happen too much right now, even though you could always just run it as a random 1 of or a 2 of, just because the Ira the other Ira Brainstorm does exist, and it is very important and does a lot for your level 1 and your level 3 combo. But still, especially with the fact that a second set is coming, at least to JP, it is nice that this sort of card exists. I did think it was pretty cool when I read it. Then we've got this Casual Wear Momo. She is a level 1 red. Her effect is that when she's placed on stage from hand, if the total level of the cards in your level is 2 or higher, you may discard a card. If you do, look at up to 4 cards from top of deck, pick a level 1 or higher card from among them, show it to your opponent, put it to your hand, the rest go to waiting room. We don't see this sort of on-play effect very often anymore. It's always nice when a deck can do it. Being in red does mean that it's harder to splash, obviously, into other decks, but if you're going the Momo deck route, that deck already requires a little bit of experience, so the experience really doesn't matter so much. And what's probably the best early play in the set, both of them are in red, so it's really easy to meet that experience requirement as soon as you hit level 1, since they're level 3s and it's easy enough to just shove them into your level. It's a very good card overall. It's great if you're playing the Momo level 1 because you're already going to be in red. That's the combo from the trial deck we discussed. She digs 4 cards closer to get you to your level 1 combo. Solid card overall. I could definitely see her popping up in a lot of the Momo lists specifically, since most red decks are going to just be filled with different Momo cards. It is nice to have the option, and it's the type of card that will do better depending on how good red is in set 2. That'll be it for any additional notable cards in the set. Now, just going to give a brief recap of everything we discussed here and my overall thoughts on the set, which would say that as someone who did make fun of this set a lot, just based on the few cards that I read, because they did seem pretty bad, I often maybe unfairly judge a set based on how good its level 3 combos are, and they all just felt like too much work and too much setup and weren't that interesting overall and seemed weak by modern standards at least. I remember thinking when I first read the set that those combos would have been decent enough if they came out a few years ago, but now that I've really looked at the whole set and seen how a lot of the cards work together, I was definitely too harsh in my initial criticism of the set. The set is not a perfect set, but I think overall from a competitive standpoint, the set is a lot of fun. It's not something that's going to really shake up the meta or anything like that, but it's a set that's good enough that I wouldn't be surprised if it gets a top or two during the current singles regional format. It's definitely a set that I think is good enough where once we get to teams format this spring and summer, and people aren't allowed to just all spam the same top S tier decks, I can definitely see this being the sort of set that will just randomly pop up onto winning teams list because it's very competent. There's a lot of good cards in it. It has a lot of the tools that you really like to see, especially at level 0. There's multiple different types of combos that do different things and deal their damage in different ways on different triggers, and they all have a lot of good support around them, or at least the most meta ones. So I think it's a set that is very, very consistent. It doesn't necessarily do any one thing particularly great, aside from maybe Fusion, but that's probably just because Bushiroad almost never comes out with Fusion anymore, which again was very flavorful to this set. But while it doesn't do anything particularly like the best out of any set that's released in modern Weiss, it definitely does a lot of individual things pretty well, and consistency is something that I think is very important when you are talking about just playing the game of Weiss. And there are a lot of sets that might be very, very powerful or have very powerful individual cards, but they do lack some consistency for one reason or another, and I think that is a big detriment, especially when you try to take a deck to something like a regional and you really, as someone who's been to a lot of regionals, consistency is very, very valuable. Consistency can definitely make up for a lack of explosiveness. If you are able to just maintain a constant board presence and be able to get out of tough deck states and be able to just loop combos and maintain resources and just deal consistent damage and swing a lot with soul triggers and just play climaxes a lot and have utility that gets you out of certain situations depending on what your matchups are, then a lot of the time I think that can definitely overcome having a weaker than average by modern standards sort of end game. And I think Dandadan does that really well. It is a set that isn't necessarily like Hololive when it comes to its zeros, where sets like Hololive or Azure Lane or some other really big sets just have a plethora and an overabundance of level zeros where they just have so many different profiles and all those sorts of things. Dandadan may not be up in that tier, but it has just enough going for it where you have enough options to build several different types of decks at level 0 depending on what combos you're choosing at 1 and at 3 and the type of playstyle you prefer and that sort of thing, which I think is always good when a deck does have multiple options depending on what the format is, what the meta is, if people like switching things out, which is just very good to have. It's got a very diverse range of level 1 combos on different triggers, depending on. You'd be surprised, for anyone who's a little bit newer, how loyal some people are to their climax triggers and how much they hate climax triggers no matter how good a climax combo is. I know people who, well, let's just say they'll never play standby or they'll never play choice just because they hate those triggers for whatever reason. So it's nice when that this set does have good combos in most triggers at level 1. It has good combos in most triggers at level 3. And just having all these different options, and a lot of the cards have a lot of really good synergy and a lot of good support that does help make up for the lack of explosiveness in the deck. It's got good utility at 2. It's got some decent enough early plays. It's definitely not a set that I think is as big a flop as a lot of people made it out to be. I think this is very much the sort of set that will benefit immensely from a set 2. We do not know what the cards in set 2 are going to be yet. They haven't started revealing them. But it's the sort of, very often with Bushiroad, what happens, and this is not a tried and true, sure, guaranteed thing, but historically what happens a lot is one of two things when Bushiroad releases 2 sets. The first set is incredibly overpowered, so when it gets its sequel set, the set is much more tame by comparison, much more fair, nothing too crazy with it. Maybe not bad, but definitely nowhere near the level of quality of card design as the first set. Or the first set was arguably weak in some ways, or weaker than average. So they make up for it a lot with the second set. You take a look around the same time frame several years ago, we got Data Live Set 1. Data Live Set 1 was one of, at the point of time in its English release, was probably one of, if not the best sets that was ever released in English, and it absolutely warped the format it was in. For its time, it was incredibly powerful and had so much good stuff, and it really ran the meta. Eventually got put on the ban list. We did get a second set, and the second set, we also got a spin-off set, a premium booster. Those sets, by comparison, were relatively tame. They did add new cards to the set that would help all existing decks and added some cool new things, but it was almost night and day, the power scale between sets 1 and 2. Around that same time, when Data Life Set 1 came out, we got our first JoJo set, which was Golden Wind. Now, JoJo Golden Wind, and I'm someone who does like JoJo, so I say this with a heavy heart. Golden Wind was one of the worst sets I think ever made. It's a terrible, terrible set. It does not hold up well, and it wasn't good when it came out. And then several years later, they gave us, on the same day, they released 2 premium sets for JoJo. We got Stone Ocean and Stardust Crusaders, and I think by comparison, those sets were infinitely better than the Golden Wind set. So they were sequel sets that made up for how weak their first set was. There are other examples I could pick from that just show, powerful set 1s and weaker set 2s, or weaker set 1s and then more powerful set 2s. I think if we follow that trend, Dandadan set 2 should get a boost. I can't imagine they're going to make it release cards that make the deck any worse. So I think at this point, whatever they will release in set 2, there should be enough good things that will only boost the deck. Who knows whether that means new combos to go to entirely, or if it's just different level zeros or different early plays and different colors or different tech options or whatever it is. But I, for one, after reading Dandadan Set 1 overall and realizing that it was better than I thought, I am excited for Set 2, just in the possibility of what could come. I am excited to play this, I think, at a locals level, Dandadan is definitely good enough to just do well. It's a really popular show, so I expect a lot of people are going to be buying playsets or opening it up, and they're going to have access to the cards and try out different decks depending on their favorite characters or mix or whatever it is, which is always nice when a set does get people excited. So at a locals level, I think this is the sort of set that will do very well because it will be popular and people will enjoy it, and it is good enough where it can definitely compete very strongly at a locals level. And for a lot of people, I think most people in Weiss don't really travel too much to regionals. Regionals are pretty infrequent and they're very spread out, at least in America. And I think a lot of people aren't really traveling to that just based on attendance numbers for Weiss. And when you do go to those regionals, you often see a lot of reoccurring faces. So the people who are traveling are often the same sort of people traveling. So I think a lot of people really are just content with having a locals, and they don't necessarily need a deck that is the type of deck that realistically has a really good shot of winning a regional or a higher level event like that. And I think that's perfectly fine. I think in terms of power creep, the last 3 or so years of Weiss have been, depending on how you want to look at it, very good for people who do enjoy power creep and do like having these stronger and stronger cards with stronger and stronger card profiles. So I think if anything, and this is just my off the cuff thoughts about this, is that the people saying that the set is so bad and so horrendous and one of the worst sets, if not the worst set of the last year, I think maybe it's just because this set sort of just slows things down a little bit. It doesn't really even its really good cards don't really push the needle forward in terms of power creep. And I think maybe collectively as a player base, people might have just gotten used to a lot of sets coming out that are they just become the big new thing. I think maybe we've gotten a little spoiled, and I think that's probably why I thought that this set wasn't too great when I first read it. But now that I like the show and I really looked at the cards and all that, I think it's something that I don't mind if Bushiroad does it. I think it's modern enough where it can keep up, and it's fun enough where you won't feel bad playing it. I think people could pick it up and enjoy it even if they don't like the show. I don't think this is a. We do get sets that are so weak sometimes that you're really only playing it because you like the IP that it's based on and really no other reason. I think this is a set that is good enough where people will play it just because they like some of what it does, because some of the things that it sets out to do, it does do pretty well. It's just certain modern cards, especially level 3 combos, have just gotten so insane and out of hand that this just seems bad in comparison to those. But if we sort of take a step back and look a little more objectively over what average Weiss has been in terms of its finishers, I think this is perfectly fine, and it's probably just solid enough overall. I think where this set really lacks, and I'm not saying people haven't criticized this part because they definitely have, but I see most of the criticisms levied at the actual gameplay of playing Dandadan. But I think the real criticism should be how much Bushiroad just dropped the ball in terms of the collectability of this set. Weiss is, I said it earlier, I'll say it again, Weiss is a game that I think is an absolute blast to play, but I think it has a bigger collector's market than an actual player base. Weiss is a game that can oftentimes be very difficult to actually find a player base at a local level. A lot of locals won't, even locals that might host other Bushiroad games, they just don't host Weiss. They don't get enough people for Weiss. They don't carry Weiss product. So Weiss might sell a decent amount in terms of overall sales, but in terms of players, it's just not quite there when compared to other big TCGs. And which is fine. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. I would like if the player base grew a little bit, but when a lot of people are spending a lot of money on cases just to collect it, and they see that there's really not much value to the set in that area, that is a little disappointing. I can see people getting a little upset by that or just disappointed, and maybe that disappointment translates into them not picking up the next Weiss set that they were interested in, even if its collectability for a next set is a lot better. Maybe they just feel they got burned and they don't feel like going through that again. That does happen. I do see plenty of people, mostly in the Weiss Discord, who just talk about how they're sick of Weiss. They don't like enjoying opening the products because of things like poor ratios or lack of signatures or lack of a lot of hits in a case or that sort of thing, which are valid criticisms, especially when you are spending a lot of money buying multiple boxes or even a case, or in the case of some people, multiple cases. And this set really is definitely below average. It is, I would, we do not know every single set that is going to be released in 2026 yet. While I do not think that this will be the worst set and overall that we get for 2026, I think collectability wise, I can't imagine a set comes out that is worse in terms of collecting, or at least in terms of collecting value. If you just like Dandadan, you just want to buy a couple boxes and you're just the type of person who just likes opening packs from like a show that you like, and you're not really looking to make your money back, you just like owning cards, which is valid for a lot of people. You just like owning cards that have your favorite characters from a favorite show on there, then sure, that's perfectly fine and there's nothing wrong with that. And those people will find a lot to like. There's lots of foils in this set. Everything gets a foil, and that might just be fun. But for people that spent $1,000 or more opening up a case and they realized like there's almost no scenario where they make their money back unless they pull the most expensive SEC and sell both playsets that come in the thing, and even then they're probably close to breaking even. It's not even a guaranteed, even with the SEC Plus. I could see that being a disappointment, and that is definitely where Bushiroad dropped the ball a little bit. Even if for whatever reason, and we're not privy to these conversations in terms of rights and licenses and how it all works out, even if we're not privy to that information and we're not exactly sure why Bushiroad either didn't or couldn't maybe get more signatures or more things that increase the value of the set from a collector standpoint, I think they could have done more just in terms of maybe art design. They could have spent a little bit more money designing the art. Most of the SPs, and there's 20 whatever of them, they look identical to the regular SRs for the set. The foiling might be slightly better, but those cards are supposed to be the cards that help you make your money back, or they're supposed to be the cards that you feel good about when you just get a prize pack at the end of a locals and you pull an SP. You're supposed to feel good and happy about pulling those sorts of cards when you realize that it basically looks 99% identical to the much cheaper SR option, and then you go and let's say you want to sell the SP and you see that a lot of them are going for maybe $20, and the most expensive ones aren't even going for much more than that. Frankly, it can be a little disappointing, and I think something like that can diminish overall enthusiasm for Weiss for people who aren't the types of people who are super invested into Weiss overall, whereas maybe Weiss is just like a secondary or a side game. It probably won't do much to people who just live and breathe Weiss, like I do. Like, I'll get over it. I can live with the set not being the most collector set ever. But I can also see it being something that sort of diminishes enthusiasm for people who got into Weiss purely because of Dandadan, and they think that I could see them feeling, to put it harshly, almost like ripped off. Value-wise, the set is not really there in that sense, and when the game overall is so dependent on people who do want to collect and just open up cases, I don't think that's really the healthiest thing for the game. So that is a little disappointing, and I think Bushiroad could have done a better job of maybe coming up with new art styles for the higher rarity cards, or just something to entice people a little bit more. Now, they did do a couple of things right in terms of adding the 2 SSPs with the signatures into the main booster as opposed to leaving them out and making them promos like JP did. I think that was a very positive decision, and that's one of the few things that really helped add value to the set. Same thing with making the Dan rares in the main booster as opposed to promos like they were in JP. That was a very important decision, I think, because some of them are very good cards and would have been ridiculously expensive if made to be promos collected through some random means. So that was smart, and I am very appreciative that Bushiroad did do that. That was a good decision on their part. So I don't want to say that they don't do anything right with this set, but still, maybe it feels like they could have done a bit more, just to add a little bit more value to it. But I think that's really it. Overall, objectively, I think personally I'd give this set like a solid 8 out of 10, just because maybe because I was pleasantly surprised. Objectively, I could see why people would sort of scoff at that and say maybe it's more like a 4 out of 10 or something like that. I'll just settle on giving it a 7 out of 10 because I think while I do collect a lot of cards and I do enjoy chasing higher rarity cards and things like that, I do very much like playing the game, and I do really like playing with this set, so that is absolutely doing most of the heavy lifting in terms of that score. But it did get me excited for the franchise overall, since I never watched it before until right before the set came out. I am very excited to see what's going to come out in the second set. So I think the set did a good enough job for someone who was definitely not a believer in this set. It did a good job once I put in the time in getting me actually excited about the franchise overall and for the future of this franchise in Weiss overall. And I think for me, that's good enough. For others, that might be good enough. Some will probably be disappointed, and I still wouldn't be surprised at the end of the year if people say this was still the worst set of the year. But you can't please everyone. I think it might not have been the strongest way to start the year in terms of being released in January, but still good enough. And yeah, so I'd say that's about it. Let me know what you think of this set, whether you like it or hate it, or somewhere in between, a little bit conflicted. Thank you for watching. This has been Catskill Weiss Schwarz, and thank you.